Breaking news tonight, a massive explosion. A rising death toll, hundreds injured, hospitals overrun as a shipment of explosives blows without warning.
American companies are feeling the impact this morning of China's move to weaken its currency. China devalued the yuan for the second straight day. The initial move Monday sent stocks tumbling in the United States. The Dow closed down 212 points Tuesday. That is a decline of more than 1%. Shares of Apple dropped by more than 5%.
Let's get to the serious stuff, shall we? The markets. China lowers the value of the yuan again. Down goes stocks.
Some financial experts are calling it an act of war, a currency war to be exact. Think about it. China needs to up its exports to improve its sagging economy. So by making its currency less valuable compared to other global currencies, China can make products manufactured in other parts of the world effectively more expensive and harder to export. That's the simple part, but there's much more to it than that, and that's why the world economy is reacting with such great concern today.
The slide has begun with their economy. Their slide has begun.
Yes.
Convinced of this. Because if you're right, that's bad news for our market. Because if they're sliding there even more, our market comes down even more.
China has rattled the global economy. The 2% devaluation of the yuan has already pushed the U.S. dollar higher, and right away, U.S. stock indices dropped more than 1%. Global equity markets also fell sharply. Oil sank even further. It also raised fears about a new currency war as other nations devalue simply to compete with China. And there are political implications. Donald Trump says China's surprise move is going to have a huge impact.
They're just destroying us. Our currency is going up, which sounds good, but actually, if you look at what it's doing to our country, and they're cutting their currency, they keep devaluing their currency until they get it right. They're doing a big cut in the yuan, and it's going to be devastating for us.
According to the Wall Street Journal, the most immediate effect is that it signals to the world that Beijing thinks the Chinese economy is sputtering. The move suggests China is looking for ways to get it going again, but it also has major implications for the U.S. and other countries that trade with China because it puts their companies at a disadvantage.
If they don't know how to deal with it, when do they really crash? When does that happen?
We're talking, I think, maybe months. You know, you have, for instance, the head of a capital research firm in Beijing saying sometime this year is going to be the final end of the Chinese economy.
You really see the American dollar collapsing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's propped up based on hope, based on hype, based on speculation. We have an enormous trade deficit, with China. Obviously, the Chinese economy is better than ours. They produce all the things that we can't produce. All the goods that Americans want to consume, they're made in China. We don't make anything the Chinese want to consume. I mean, I guess some motion pictures and music, but that's about it.
Did the Chinese just kill a rate hike here in the United States by showing its weak hand of cards? And will it move overnight? Will that spark a currency war with China? And what will it mean for U.S. investors?
All the real products are manufactured over there. Their economy is far more powerful, far more dynamic than the American economy. That's why we have these big deficits. But people believe in the myth of this U.S. economy. They believe that this bubble is genuine. They made the same mistake in the late 1990s. They made the same mistake, before the financial crisis of 2008. They're making a mistake again. We are on the verge of a much worse financial crisis than the one we went through in 2008.
We are on the verge of a much worse financial crisis than the one we went through in 2008.
And it's going to take the form of a currency crisis. You're talking about currency wars. America is going to win the currency war, which is a race to the bottom, right? And you don't want to win a currency war because a currency war is different from most wars in that the object is to kill yourself. And unfortunately, we're going to succeed.
China's move to devalue its currency sparking today's sell-off, reviving concerns that the second largest economy is beginning a tailspin.
And mindful of that, internationally, does that mean the yuan replaces the dollar as the international base currency? We've got about a minute left.
It very well may. Who knows? I mean, I think the Chinese are accumulating a lot of gold. I think they're, being very quiet about how much gold they're buying. In fact, I think they're deliberately misrepresenting how much their gold holdings have increased. They are taking advantage of the recent weakness in the price of gold to buy more. And by the way, the gold was up today. Not only was it up big in terms of the yuan, but it rose in terms of the dollar as well. Get out of the dollar before the bottom drops out.
All right, Peter Schiff.
Overseas tonight, the death toll is rising after a pair of explosions delivered a massive 1-2 punch to the Chinese city of Tianjin.
A massive explosion that has been reported at the Tianjin municipality in China. Take a listen to this. That explosion occurred in what's called the Binhai New area. It's in North China's Tianjin municipality. It occurred at about 11:30 p.m. last night.
The blast's being called apocalyptic.
We're getting our first pictures, and would you look at this? Explosions in China and an absolute disaster underway now in the city of Tianjin, or Tianjin, I should say. This happened Wednesday night at 11:30 p.m. local time. An enormous explosion that lit up the night sky and could be felt for miles in all directions. State broadcaster CTV, Central Television of China, reports the blast happened in a shipment of explosives.
In a shipment of explosives.
Whoa! Oh! What the? Holy no! What? Oh shit! No, baby! Oh, no! Are we dangerous here? Yeah, we're dangerous. Oh my God! Oh dear! Are you filming? Yes, I'm filming! Whoa! Whoa! I think we are dead. Let's go! Let's go down! Let's go! Let's go! Take the stairs! Come on!
That is a new development area. It is a port city. As a matter of fact, it is the largest artificial port in China. It serves as a container port, but there are also a lot of industrial companies, chemical companies. We don't know exactly what happened here. And once again, these are social media pictures, not completely authenticated by CNBC or NBC. But as you can see, it appears to show a massive industrial explosion of some sort.
A first blast had shaken the port city of Tianjin just before midnight. Then this. A massive explosion, many times bigger than the first blast, and a blinding white light. They see it, and then they feel it. The shockwave shattering windows and turning shards of glass into projectiles. Images of the blast flooded Chinese social media. A storefront disappearing. A living room covered in broken glass. Tonight, local hospitals are overwhelmed with hundreds of injured, some burned, many cut by flying glass and debris. Tianjin is one of China's biggest industrial centers, home to 11 million people and a major hub for petrochemical industries. Tonight, people are being warned to stay inside in case of toxic fumes. And 70 miles away in Beijing, this message: please shut the doors and windows, not sure if harmful gas.
Residents are posting photos of blown out windows and doors on a local media site called Weibo, similar to Twitter, but users are finding that posts relating to the disaster have disappeared. Others note that the number of searchable posts on the disaster fluctuated, basically a sign that Chinese authorities are manipulating or placing limits on the number of posts. The Wall Street Journal's social media editor, Natalie Andrews, is with me now. Natalie, journalists have to stay at least 6 miles from the explosion site. One journalist took pictures inside a hospital. Security guards demanded he delete the images. How do these physical restrictions reflect what's happening with social media?
Yes, I think this is a major reflection of the censorship and the issues that are reflective of China, the use of internet in China in general. And Weibo is huge in China, and there's millions of posts about the explosion in China as people are trying to find out what is going on with the explosion. And the posts about the explosion are disappearing. People are quickly trying to take the posts about the explosion and reposting them on YouTube and Twitter and different sites so that they stay elsewhere on the internet in other places where they're not being taken down. But they're still disappearing, and it's continuing to be a much talked about issue. Oftentimes people on Weibo will use codes for different things. So maybe they won't use the word explosion, but they'll insert a different word, and so they can still keep talking about the issue at hand without being censored or having their posts taken down as quickly.
The blast happened in the port area of Tianjin. It's a city which is home to more than 15 million people. It's a major port near Beijing. Just before 11 p.m. local time, a fire was reported at a warehouse in the Binhai New area of the city. That's close to the harbour. It's known for its heavy industry. At around 11:30 p.m, the first explosion, quickly followed by another, much larger blast just seconds later. People have described feeling the impact for several kilometres from the blast site. Windows were shattered, doors were blown off their hinges. The China Earthquake Network Center measured the magnitude of the explosions, saying the second, larger blast was the equivalent of detonating 21 tons of TNT.
Morning broke in Tianjin to reveal the extraordinary force of last night's blast. Rows of unsold cars molten almost beyond recognition. Some places still on fire as the Chinese authorities count the cost of an explosion so large it was seen by satellites in space.
甚至我们现在其实从这样的一个地理地貌上已经看不出它之前的样子。结合这个画面，跟大家去说一说我们刚才所看到的中距当中起飞。所以当我们的航拍器升空之后，在我们已经看不到非常明显的这样一个明火的区域。那现在检测也就让我们今天的所有的救援能够更近距离的能够推进，这也使我们现场的在更科学有序的环境当中去推进。
Preparing to enter in a toxic area. This soldier is one of more than 200 members of the China Nuclear Biological Chemical Emergency Rescue Team who have been sent to Tianjin. Their top priority is to test the air in and around the blast site for toxic gases.
We have decided to send 2 groups, in total 12 people, to the core area of the polluted blast site. We're going to briefly plot and measure the polluted area so as to provide the further search and rescue operations with a schematic diagram.
Samples have already been collected from the polluted area, and technicians are conducting some simple tests on the materials. An air quality monitoring network has also been established. It has been reported that there are still 700 tons of toxic chemicals at the site. However, the team is well prepared to neutralize the toxins.
We are the only nuclear biological chemical rescue team in China. It was a really short notice that we were assigned to come to help.
We are the only nuclear biological chemical rescue team in China. It was a really short notice that we were assigned to come to help.
But we have been well prepared for the mission. I'm quite confident that we will accomplish the tasks required by our superiors.
Aside from what caused the blast, one of the big questions many people have is it safe to go back? That's what these soldiers are going to find out. They are preparing to head into the main blast sites and measure the air for toxins.
The air detection process can take too long out of safety considerations. The first group of soldiers went on a mission that lasted for about just 20 minutes. The returning soldiers need to be well detoxified before they can take off their protective clothing. The site has been sealed off, and the chemical unit soldiers are doing all they can to bring back samples for analysis and help contain the contamination in the area.
You know, the hazards of doing business in China. We've heard about safety problems. This explosion, though, I think really shook a lot of people to their core.
In fact, it shook people, and it was actually felt by the U.S. Geological Survey all the way in Beijing, which is about 100 miles away from the port city of Tianjin. So the impact was vast, and obviously with the pictures that you just saw, it was pretty epic as well. 50 people have died. So the issue here, though, is the transparency of the investigation going forward. What will happen? Will President Xi Jinping be trusted with handling this? Because you have lots of other kind of mechanical or man-made types of disasters, chemical disasters in other parts of China that's been going on for decades. I've reported on them. I've been to these factories that leak chemicals into the water supply, into the soil. Now, citizens are actually complaining about the air quality and about issues of groundwater resources, and that's really where the stability issue and the economic issue come in for the Chinese government and their ability to actually conduct this investigation and do what's right for their citizens.
I'm glad you brought up the economic issue, Joe, because, you know, not to be insensitive, the death toll is horrific, but at the same time, the economy is so shaky now.
Right.
They devalued the currency 2 days in a row, although they've said they're trying to address it and do some spin control.
Yeah, they sure are.
What's the broader problem, do you think, with their economy?
Well, looking at the economy, the fundamentals are no longer strong. You have internal demand that's waning, slowing growth across the board. The demand just isn't where it needs to be to sustain an export-led economy anymore. So that's why you see some of the devaluation of the Yuan. You also saw the stock market tank about a month ago. The government also getting involved there. Very questionable about whether or not their policies actually worked in the medium term. So
that's a very good
there's
point.
Lots of different moving parts. An explosion like this certainly comes at a very bad time for the government.
And you wonder if there's beginning to be even more of an anti-Chinese sentiment in this country. You mentioned Mr. Trump. He was on Lou Dobbs last night. I want to play to you what he said to Lou on his show last night.
Okay. Had a president or a politician or group that even understands what they're doing. They feel that Obama is either not watching the ship, incompetent. What it means is they're going to take more jobs and more money out of the United States. It's as simple as that.
Joe, last word to you. Do you agree that we need to be worried about this from an economic standpoint?
The overall situation certainly is worrisome to, like you said, top CEOs and also those who are watching what the Fed may or may not do in September and then in December when we get that first and second rate hike. Because looking at the global economy overall, the economy is improving, but a lot of the fundamentals are still not terribly strong.
One key port here in the U.S. actually considers Tianjin a sister port of sorts, doing millions of dollars in business with Tianjin. This matters here as far as economics are concerned, as well as, of course, the human devastation.
You said recently that you thought that there might not actually be elections in 2016 because of widespread anarchy. Do you really believe that?
Well, I hope that that's not going to be the case, but certainly there is the potential, because you have to recognize that we have a rapidly increasing national debt, a very unstable financial foundation, and you have all of these things going on like the ISIS crisis that could very rapidly change things that are going on in our nation. And unless we begin to deal with these things in a comprehensive way and in a logical way, there is no telling what could happen in just a matter of a couple of years. And particularly in a situation where we have a Senate and a Senate leader who has over 300 bills sitting on his desk, will not bring them to the floor for a vote, thereby thwarting the will of the people. And this country was supposed to be a country where the government conformed to the will of the people, not the people conformed to the will of the government.
Let me pick up on that, because and talk specifically about a candidacy. You say, and this is your quote, the likelihood is strong that you will run for president in 2016. Do you really want to spend the next 2 years begging people for money, shaking hands, eating a lot of bad meals, when I think you would agree, at best, you're a distinct long shot.
Well, let me put it this way. It would be much more pleasant to put my feet up, to relax. You know, I've made plenty of money. I can live a very comfortable life, and that would be my preference. However, given the state of our nation, looking at what's going on, and understanding that sometimes we're called to do things that we don't want to do because we have to do them. And we look at the future of our children, our grandchildren, all the people who come behind us. If we all run for the hills, if we all run for the most comfortable place and just allow whatever to happen, then we get what we deserve.
I have about a minute left. I'm going to be transparent here. You and I are friends. I have great regard for you, and we have had this question that I'm about to ask you, we've talked about in private. But after looking at Barack Obama and what's happened with his lack of political experience over these last 6 years, wouldn't putting Ben Carson in the Oval Office be akin to putting a politician in an operating room and having him perform one of your brain surgeries?
I don't think so. I think what is required for leadership is wisdom and the ability to assemble an appropriate team, ability to listen, and an ability to make wise decisions. And we also have to recognize what I said a little bit earlier. Our system was designed by our founders with the people in mind, and with the will of the people in mind, not with the will of the government. If you want the will of the government, yes, you need people who spend their whole lives in politics. And they are people who are much more likely to be able to impose the will of the government. But I don't think that that's what we need. And Jefferson said, when things got so bad, the people would actually make a correction. I think it's time to make that correction now.
Ben Carson, thank you. Thanks for coming in today. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Chris.
This is Jonathan Cahn, the author of The Harbinger and the Mystery of the Shemitah. We've been deluged with questions from around the nation, around the world, as to recent events and to what's coming. So we decided to make this, to address this in a very brief way. I believe a great shaking is coming to America and the world. I believe it will involve an economic collapse, a financial collapse, and a shaking even greater than those realms. Does it have to happen in this period coming at the climax of the Shemitah or autumn? It doesn't. I've given two cautions throughout. First, God is sovereign. He doesn't have to do anything according to our timetable or our thoughts. And our faith, I do not want it to rest in dates, but in God. And in getting right with God, that's the point. And the Shemitah is a pattern, a cycle. It can manifest more in one cycle, less in another. Nothing has to happen. It could be uneventful. The point is not dates, it's getting right in the will of God. At the same time, the other caution is, it could happen according to this timing. And that's why I gave dates in the book, in the Mystery of the Shemitah, that it's actually there that we should be aware of it. I believe regardless of the timing, whether during or beyond this time period, a great shaking is coming. What has happened since the Harbinger was released is America has not grown closer to God, it's grown farther. And the Harbingers have continued to manifest as America has continued on a course away from God. And what just recently happened is ominous. What happened a little while before recording this, earlier in the summer, is America took a step, it crossed the line. It struck down through the Supreme Court the biblical definition of marriage. This was a tectonic event, a seismic event, a culture-changing event with profound ramifications, not just for marriage, but for America's future itself, for culture, society, education, law, religious freedom, persecution, apostasy, and judgment. It altered what has been for thousands of years the most basic component of human civilization. It's like altering the atom and not expecting a massive repercussion. It represents the breaking of nothing less than the order of God's creation. On the first day that America existed as a fully formed, constituted nation, on the day of the first inauguration of a president, Washington gave a prophetic warning. He said, the propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right that heaven itself has ordained. In other words, if America ever turns away from God, disregards his eternal rules of order and right, then the blessings of God will be removed from the land. And if anything could constitute the disregarding of the eternal rules of order and right that heaven has ordained, it is the striking down of the biblical, historic definition of marriage. And so it represents what happened, the rejection of a nation of its Judeo-Christian foundation, of the Word of God on which it was built, to become an officially post-Christian nation or an anti-Christian nation in its mainstream culture. And when, as the prophets cried out, when sin is enshrined or is viewed as good, then righteousness is viewed as evil. And so a warning has come of persecution, not just from the pulpits, but from the Supreme Court itself. Every one of the 4 dissenting judges issued a warning to the effect that believers, Christians in effect, will be persecuted. A change has come. And there is an ominous message here. So the word Shemitah can mean the fall. In the Shemitah of 1973, there was a moral, spiritual fall when America decided to legalize the killing of its unborn children. And now in this Shemitah of 2015 has come another fall. One of the principles in Scripture is that judgment is often preceded by an act of desecration. Ezekiel was in the temple, was shown by God the desecration of the holy place that was being committed there, and then he was shown of the judgment that was coming. Daniel was in Babylon, and in Babylon they had a feast, a party, a celebration to the gods. And the king of Babylon sent for the holy sacred vessels of God that were taken from the temple of Jerusalem to be brought out into the party and to be used as drinking vessels as they partied to the gods. And as they did it, a hand appeared on the wall and wrote words in Aramaic, the so-called the handwriting on the wall. The words warned that judgment was coming, and that night judgment came to Babylon. Desecration precedes judgment. What happened this summer to take what is of God? Marriage is a vessel, a sacred vessel of God. To take it and use that vessel as the temple vessels were used against their purpose for another purpose and against the purposes of God and the Word of God is an act of desecration. And that leads, it is to drink wine in Babylon from the sacred vessels of God. And that portends judgment. The 9 harbingers that are mentioned in the book The Harbinger, the signs of a nation heading for judgment, have all been fulfilled, have actually continued to manifest as America has been racing to judgment in defiance of God. And all these things are converging. While America has descended from God with increasing acceleration, so at the same time, its relationship with Israel has deteriorated to levels it has never known. That is another danger sign, because the Bible says, I will bless those who bless the children of Abraham. I will curse those who curse them. And in every way, we are converging. It's like a perfect storm. Do I believe it is wise to be ready to prepare physically? I do. Not in fear, but in wisdom, and not in selfishness, but to bless others. But having a store of essentials to get you through when systems could break down, I believe is a wise thing anyway, to have regardless of food, water, other essentials. If nothing happens, worst case scenario, no worst case scenario, you can eat your investment. We are not survivalists, we are revivalists. We are here to bless others and to be a light. But I believe it would be wise in this way. It says the wise man sees calamity coming and prepares. Financially, we've been asked, we've been deluged with questions. I wouldn't feel wise to be investing in the stock market unless the Lord told you. or having things linked to the rising of the stock market. Rather, the most important preparation is to be right with God. If you're looking for safety in such times, the word for safety in Hebrew is Yeshua. And Yeshua is the name of Jesus. The safest place is to be in Him. If you're not born again, if you're not saved, if you're not born again, you're not going to heaven, and you're not saved, and you're not right with God, you need to get born again. Get your life into Yeshua, Jesus. That's salvation. And if you are, and you're looking for what's the safest place to go, where should I live? Is it the Midwest? Is it the coast? Where should I be? Well, I can tell you the safest place in America is called the will of God. Make sure your life is in the will of God. If there's whatever is in your life that shouldn't be there in your life, get it out of your life. Don't say tomorrow, do it today. And whatever should be in your life that's not in your life now, the time is now, today, to start ruling it in. Take that first step. What happened this summer in the highest court of the land, it represents a change where the faith, the biblical faith, is going from a status quo faith to a radical faith, a cultural faith to a countercultural faith, an establishment faith to a prophetic and revolutionary faith. And we have to become a prophetic people. The temptation is to be intimidated, to be pressured, to go along with things or dance around them or to be silent, but we have to resist that. This is the time of our testing. We speak of the days of Elijah. Well, these are the days of Elijah when a civilization is turned against its very foundation in apostasy. These are the days of Ezekiel, same thing. The days of Jeremiah, the days of the apostles with an increasingly anti-Christian world culture. You know, we preach about biblical times and we preach about living there, or hey, we would want to live in the book of Acts. Well, you've got them now. That time has arrived. These are the days of Elijah, and we must become the Elijahs of the day. The most important thing you can do now is to make the decision that no matter what, you will follow God without compromise, without reservation, without wavering, all out on fire. The grays are disappearing. And as the grays disappear from the darkness, as the darkness removes the gray to become totally dark, that means it's time for the lights of God to remove the gray from their lives and become totally bright for God. This is the time of our testing. Will show where we are at. But this is the time that not only produces the greatest evil, it also produces the greatest good. These are the days that produce greatness. This is when the greatest testimonies come, when the greatest believers come. It will produce greatness in you because it's going to force you to make the decision, to make it for one or the other. And if you make it for God, you're going to grow stronger and stronger and stronger. Let this produce greatness in your life. Draw the line in the sand. People ask me, is there going to be judgment or revival? I answer that it can be both. There can be judgment or shaking and revival at the same time. In fact, revival can come out of shaking. And it may be that America has grown so deaf to the voice of God that only through shaking, only through His shouting, can revival come. But we need to be ready for that. We need to be praying for revival now, fervently. And not only praying for revival, we need to be actually living in revival. If you decide to live in revival in your own life with God, then the revival starts here and now. We need to be ready. It is time to be bold for God. If these are the days when the world grows darker, then it's time for the people of God to grow and shine brighter. If the bad is going from bad to worse, then it's time for the good to go from good to great. And those who do, God will especially anoint. It says, the eyes of the Lord search the entire earth, looking for the one whose heart is completely His. And He will show Himself mightily, powerfully for that one. You be that one. You be that people. You be that congregation. You be that ministry. Shine for God. Be all out for God. And God will greatly, powerfully anoint you. This will be our most challenging time, but it can also be our greatest hour. Be great. Rise to the call. Rise to the mantle for which you were placed in this world, in your mother's womb, for such a time as this. As the Lord said and says to you, Kumi ori kiva orech uchvod Adonai alayach sorach, Arise and shine, people of God. Arise and shine, man of God, woman of God, child of God. Arise and shine, because your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Darkness covers the earth. Darkness will cover the peoples. But the Lord will shine, and his glory will rise upon you. And nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your shining. Be strong and be of good courage. And may God bless and keep you, now and always. Shalom.